Hey everyone, I'm Megyn Kelly. Welcome to the Megyn Kelly Show and happy Friday. There is so much to get to and most of it just broke this morning. From Vice President Kamala Harris meeting Hispanic voters at a Univision town hall. So many dreams, so much ambition, and also aspirations. You'll be shocked. To her running mate, Tim Walz, getting pressed about his lies by Michael Strahan on ABC. Will wonders never cease? To former President Barack Obama, labeling black men who won't vote for Kamala Harris unacceptable sexists. Who died and made you boss of who everyone votes for? Plus, Doug Emhoff is speaking out to Joe Scarborough, and wait until you hear how Scarborough handles the allegations of Emhoff's alleged history of violence against women. It's disgusting. You're a disgusting hack fool, Joe Scarborough. Disgusting. How dare you? How dare you have him in front of you and treat those allegations the way you just did? You with the dead body in your office. You got a history. You got a history here of bad behavior. I don't know what happened with the dead body in the office. Something bad. Maybe not you. But the point is, given that and given all the rumors around that, you'd think you'd be bending over backwards to at least feign an interest in things that happen to women that might be really disturbing. Should at least fake it. Maybe your wife Mika didn't tell you that, but you should. You heard it straight from me. It's disgusting. These Democrats want to pretend that they are our protectors. We don't have anything to worry about because they're going to preserve abortion and therefore they're pro-women and therefore we can put them in office. What about a man who wails on a woman in public to the point where she's whipped around, stumbles, runs from him into a cab, and has to call her male friend just so she can feel safe that another beating isn't about to happen? Is that something someone like Morning Joe, cheery little Joe, who we have our coffee with, might want to ask about? Didn't happen. Not from the clip that they've released. I'm going off of the 2-minute clip he put out as evidence of his interview with Doug Emhoff. I am so sick of these media personalities like Tim Miller and now Joe Scarborough getting their hands, both work for MSNBC, one is a contributor, one's a host, getting their hands on Doug Emhoff, who's been seriously accused of a very serious act and treating it like it's a nothing, like that one time you dropped an F-bomb in front of a woman. This is totally unacceptable. It's just totally unacceptable. And they would never be doing this if the shoe were on the other foot. Never. Look, I think I have standing. I have standing to call this out. I believe I have a history of calling out bad behavior on both sides of the aisle, no matter whether it's my quote side or the other. That's what you do when you're not a hack. When you're a hack, you run cover for somebody. And when you have only the second interview in Scarborough's case of the guy since this bad allegation hit, you ask about it in a fair but real way. And you know what? You make news. When he answers it, you make news, which is the other goal when you work for a news channel, as he does. The whole thing. All right, there's a lot to go over, though. A lot. I mean, Barack Obama, I don't know that this is the way, sir. I'm not sure you shame black voters, black men, into voting for your preferred candidate. I don't think that's how it works. I think persuasion is probably the better angel here, but I'm going to ask my guests today what they think. Joining me now, our pals from The Morning Meeting, an interactive show, which you can find on the Two-Way YouTube channel. Mark Halperin is editor-in-chief of Two-Way. Sean Spicer is host of The Sean Spicer Show on The First TV. And Dan Turrentine is a former Democratic strategist. Don't miss a moment. Subscribe to this show on YouTube and follow me on Insta, Facebook, and X. Grand Canyon University, a private Christian university in beautiful Phoenix, Arizona, believes we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. GCU believes in equal opportunity and that the American dream starts with purpose. By honoring your career calling, you can impact your family, friends, and your community. Change the world for good by putting others before yourself. Whether your pursuit involves a bachelor's, master's, or doctoral degree, GCU's online, on-campus, and hybrid learning environments are designed to help you achieve your unique academic, personal, and professional goals. With over 350 academic programs as of June 2024, GCU meets you where you are and provides a path to help you fulfill your dreams. The pursuit to serve others is yours. Let it flourish. Find your purpose at Grand Canyon University. Private, Christian, affordable. Visit gcu.edu. Guys, welcome back to the show. Great to see you.
It's good to be here.
Okay, so let's start with Barack Obama, who apparently swung by. He's out on the campaign trail for Kamala, and he swung by a campaign office. Was it in Pennsylvania? That's where he's been, I think. And Pittsburgh. And decides to offer this little, and Barack Obama doesn't do anything unintentionally. So clearly he wanted this to get out there. Decides to offer this little ditty to the black men who are reluctant, according to polls, to vote for Kamala Harris.
Part of it makes me think that, well, you just aren't feeling the idea of having a woman as president. And you're coming up with other alternatives and other reasons for them. And so now you're thinking about sitting out or even supporting somebody who has a history of denigrating you because you think that's a sign of strength, because that's what being a man is, putting women down. That's not acceptable. We have not yet seen
Not acceptable.
the same kinds of energy and turnout in all quarters of our neighborhoods and communities as we saw when I was running. Now, I also want to say that that seems to be more pronounced with the brothers. When you have a choice that is this clear, when on the one hand you have somebody who grew up like you, knows you, went to college with you, understands the struggles and pain and joy that comes from those experiences. Who's had to work harder and do more.
Wow. Unbelievable. The not in there, I think, was his line. You're coming up with all kinds of reasons and excuses. I've got a problem with that. Really bold. And I mean, honestly, Mark, pretty offensive stuff. Like, the only reason a black man might not be voting for her is they don't like women. They don't want to vote for a woman.
Well, I think probably we'll all agree that hectoring, lecturing Barack Obama is not the optimal, attractive Barack Obama. But the only thing I'll say about this is a sustained problem. It was a problem for Joe Biden, getting the support of young black men and young Hispanic men also. It's a problem for Kamala Harris that could cost her the election. And the way they've been trying to make these appeals hasn't worked. So does this one seem like it will work? Probably not to anyone here or anyone we know, but it is getting news coverage. It is getting out there that they have a problem. And I think unless somebody can offer up a better solution than this, hectoring, lecturing Obama might be the best they have.
I don't know if that's true, Sean. I mean, we're checking the internet this morning just to see how are black men who are at least on X responding to this. Here's a sampling of what we found.
I don't know about y'all, but I think that my ancestors fought far too hard for my right to vote in this country for me to support someone just because they look like me. Especially when that person who looks like me doesn't give a damn about me. Doesn't create a single job. She is actually probably uniquely terrible at her job.
With like the her. Brothers.
He kind of tugged his own.
With the brothers. We ain't your brother.
In that room, did it seem like he said anything that could get them to change their mind?
Boy, if any black men are at a Kamala Harris rally, their mind is already made up.
Yeah, for real.
Sorry, Obama. I'm a black man, and I'm voting for Donald Trump for president, and there is no amount of lecturing or bullying or shaming that you can do that is going to make me change that decision. I am not afraid to vote for Kamala Harris because she is a woman. I refuse to vote for Kamala Harris because she has spent the last 4 years destroying this country. Maybe the surrogate black dad for a lot of fatherless black boys that are running around this country, but I got a dad. I know who he is, and it ain't you.
I have the nerve to look in the eyes of black men who are out here working their off, grinding, taking care of their families, mature, responsible men, spiritually mature men, handling their business. This man that is worth, some estimates say, of $75 million, has then the audacity to tell these same black men that it is unacceptable for you to vote any other way than what I tell you.
Pretty good, especially the last guy there, Sean.
You know, Megyn, since we've been talking, I actually got somebody else who just sent me. It says, it would be a shame if Barry saw this, and it's another clip. Look, I don't know that there's any group of young men, whether it's black men, white men, Asian men, Hispanic men, that want to be lectured by the old guy and say, you're stupid, you're dumb, this is what you should be doing, right? There's no kid that ever wants to be done. These guys have found themselves in a hole, and 25 days out, the solution was to have young people lectured by an old guy. This is a problem of their own making. As Mark said, it stems back to the Biden candidacy. And they should have figured it out a lot quicker. Instead, their heads were in the sand, right? They kept saying, it's not a problem. These kids could never vote for Donald Trump. And they failed to recognize the problem that exists. And it's, as Mark noted, it transcends not just black men, young white men, Hispanic men, and I bet you there's Asian men that think the same way too. These guys waited too long. The thing that I think is interesting politically, Kamala Harris went out a couple days ago and did a media blitz, right? And media blitzes are supposed to help you move the needle in your direction. And instead, the answer was, we got the View clip of her saying that she wouldn't do anything different than Obama, and that went viral, and every Republican thanked them for doing this. They send Obama out to do this, to lecture young black men about why they're voting, and it's having the opposite effects. These videos are now popping up all over social media saying, I don't need to be lectured. They're having a boomerang effect with all of their strategies. And to Mark's point, this could be a big problem as we head into Election Day.
Dan, I want to pick up on, we saw our pal Rob Smith in there. He was great. But the guy at the end who I don't know, my apologies, really I think nailed it. You know, there are a lot of people in the country who are drawn to Trump right now, notwithstanding some of Trump's problematic character traits, because they think their lives will improve under him. They think the economy will be better under him, and they have 4 years of experiencing it to inform that opinion. And I do wonder how they're going to react to being called sexists by Barack Obama, who he rightly points out, how many times have we seen him on the yachts of his billionaire Hollywood friends and on his estate in Martha's Vineyard, trying to tisk them into voting for the woman, despite his perception that they're a bunch of misogynists?
Yeah, this is a problem. Campaigning Barack Obama, good. Professor Barack Obama, not good. When he was in the arena later in the day, shirt sleeves rolled up, whipping the crowd into a frenzy, there's few people in the Democratic Party that are better. But he does have this history. You go back to 2008 when he was talking to an audience and trying to explain his struggles in central Pennsylvania. He was talking about people clinging to their guns. And what's I think most kind of bizarre about his statement, there is no qualitative or quantitative research that shows that's why young black men are not voting for Kamala Harris. There is some research that shows that Latina women prefer a strong man and have a problem with a woman, fine. But all the research, and we see it on our show where we've had young black men come on, is that they think the economy would be better under Donald Trump. They're not hearing, they don't trust Kamala Harris. So I don't see, to Mark's point, you're shaking the trees, you're making news, you're forcing to the forefront Kamala Harris has a problem with black men. But Megyn, I agree with you. This is not the way to reach them, to lecture them and tell them, I know better. This is what you should be voting. No one likes to be talked to that way.
Megyn, can I, one other
now,
quick
hold
point
on. I got to get back to my yacht. Go ahead, Sean.
No, I was going to say, one thing, when we focus group areas where we had problems as a Republican Party 10 years ago, one of the things that we heard among Black constituencies was that they didn't feel comfortable voting Republican because they didn't think any of their friends or neighbors or colleagues or whatever were voting, and they didn't want to be an island unto themselves. What's happening now is that more traditional Democratic constituencies feel comfortable voting for Trump and for Republicans because they see that they're not alone. And we're seeing that more and more, whether it's Jewish voters, young voters, Hispanic voters, Black voters. They're realizing that they're not alone and that these fissures that exist within the Democratic Party are becoming a bigger and bigger problem for them. You look at the gap that Kamala Harris has with Asians, with Latinos, with Blacks. Yes, she's still ahead 15, 20 points. And as Republicans, I'd like that to be closer. But the reality is she's not even close to the margins that Obama was. Or Biden, for that matter.
Just to put a little meat on that bone, according to the latest CNN poll, well, it was released end of September, but it's the latest on this issue of Black voters. She leads Trump by 63 points, which sounds like a lot, but Biden had a 75-point margin among Black voters in 2020. And so that's some of what they're up against. Go ahead, Mark.
You know, in an end game of a presidential, you want to put to bed things you can put to bed. States, you want to lock down a state so you don't have to keep spending resources there. You want to lock down certain constituency groups. And the challenge they have is they've tried to lock down this group for a long time. And obviously they're still having to devote resources to it. Pretty soon, you're going to start seeing messaging from the Republicans about Kamala Harris's record as a prosecutor. Remember, Donald Trump passed criminal justice reform. Remember that there's a lot of belief that Trump was wrongly prosecuted. This is something that Democrats make fun of, and they say it's racist of Trump to appeal to the Black community and Hispanic community to say he's been persecuted and when he was prosecuted. I hear it all the time. It's not a made-up thing. It's not a racist thing. And so Trump is going to stay on offense with messaging with these communities, and she's going to have to keep playing defense, and every resource they spend on that is taking away from other groups. It's a big asymmetrical advantage right now because Trump is playing very little demographic defense. She's playing with Jews, Arab Americans. She's playing with Blacks, Hispanics, younger people. It's a lot of defense to be playing with just a couple weeks to go.
There's obviously a new push on Team Blue to capture you guys. Maybe not you, Sean, but to capture men. I mean, you're a man, but they know you're not capturable. I don't know, maybe Barack Obama's part of that, but they've got Tim Walz going out there trying to get the gamers, which would be presumably young men. And now they have released this ad. I can't. I want you to explain it to me. Explain it to me as a Democrat. What were they thinking? Here is their outreach to men.
I'm a man.
I'm a man.
I'm a man, man.
And I'm man enough.
I'm man enough to enjoy a barrel-proof bourbon.
Neat.
Man enough to cook my steak rare.
Man enough to deadlift 500, then braid the out of my daughter's hair.
You think I'm afraid to rebuild a carburetor? I eat carburetors for breakfast.
I ain't afraid of bears.
That's what bear hugs are for.
I'll tell you another thing I sure as shit am not afraid of. Women. I'm not afraid of women.
I'm not afraid of women.
They want to control their bodies? I say go for it.
They want to use IVF to start a family? I'm not afraid of families.
They want to be childless cat ladies?
Have all the cats you want.
Woman wants to be president?
Well, I hope she has the guts to look me right in the eye and accept my full-throated endorsement.
Because I'm man enough to support women.
Man enough to know what kind of donuts I like.
Man enough to admit I'm lost, even when I refuse to ask for directions.
Man enough to not ban young women from reading Little Women.
Or one of those pants books that the sisters like.
I'm man enough to raw dog a flight. It sucked. Not worth it. I'm man enough to be emotional in front of my wife.
In front of my kids.
In front of my horse.
I'm man enough to tell you that I cry at Love Actually.
Good Will Hunting.
West Side Story.
That and Predator.
You get the flavor. We've jumped the shark. Dan, please help me.
Oh, goodness. I almost thought that was a Saturday Night Live skit there for a minute. The best I think of is they're trying to use humor and just kind of make it so over the top that you chuckle, but you pay attention and you remember it. It's a little awkward. I'm not sure that's how I would do it. That's the best that I think you could say about that ad.
All I can think is that like, who is advising them on what appeals to men and what men are like and how to get men. And this is the best I've come up with. I think it's this woman, Ariel Fodder. Remember her from White Chicks for Kamala? Remember this lady?
As white women, we need to use our privilege to make positive changes. If you find yourself talking over or speaking for BIPOC individuals, or God forbid, correcting them, just take a beat. And instead, we can put our listening ears on. So do learn from and amplify the voices of those who have been historically marginalized, and use the privilege you have in order to push for systemic change. As white people, we have a lot to learn and unlearn. So do check your blind spots.
That woman, Sean Spicer, is not only clearly advising Team Harris about how to get men in line, but also CBS News on how interviews with BIPOC people ought to be conducted who are on to bash Israel. We'll talk about that later. But who thinks men will respond to that?
I also find it interesting. They announced yesterday they're sending out Tim Walz to be the guy that's going to reach. I wish this wasn't so laughable. I mean, Dan's right. This is like a Saturday Night Live commercial or skit that they're doing. This is the same group of people that said we're going to issue camo hats to reach conservatives. Like somehow that's you got a camo hat? Yeah, I totally now want to vote for you. And I think that that's the problem that we're having with this campaign is I think that the people that they have advising on different issues are the same people that can't define what a woman is. And they're sitting there saying, well, we're going to reach out to men because we're going to put on a flannel shirt and a camo hat and make it sound cool. I wish they spend more money on these ads. I hope to God they do. But this gets back to what I was saying a moment ago, Megyn. Think about it. They go on, they do a media blitz, it backfires on them. They send out Barack Obama, it backfires on them. They literally are blowing this lead. And in the last 25 days of a campaign, you want to be surfing the wave into the beach, not trying to hold it back. This is a classic attempt of prevent defense, which is, we're trying to make sure that we have enough time on the clock. They're blowing this in real time, and I cannot wait for all of the analysis on November 6th about how they blew this.
So I obviously am not a man, but I feel like I know a lot of men who they're targeting. Almost all the men I know are Republicans or Democrats who are pretty centrist. Obviously, I know a lot of right-wingers too, but I'm just saying, like in my own private personal circles, most of the guys are pretty centrist, left or right. And so those are potential voters. I would think that the Kamala Harris campaign is thinking, I want to get them. They're not thinking about established Republicans. They're thinking about people who don't love Trump, who have voted Republican in the past, but he's a problem for them. Let me speak for them. This isn't going to do it. You've got to revamp your efforts. Just because they don't love Trump doesn't mean they're effeminate or severely obese, or when they're around their horses, they're wanting you to know how much they cry. That is some far left woman's idea of what a man is. That's not what a real man is, left or right. So they should have called me. I would have helped them. I would have told them what they should be doing. And honestly, it should have involved an actual man, a manly man who could make the case why Trump is not the one. They missed the opportunity. All right.
But
so
it goes back to what, but you said this a moment ago, Megyn. They're fundamentally missing the point here. No one's not voting, or maybe there are probably some people, but the vast majority of people who have an issue with Kamala Harris, it's not her gender. It's her lack of authenticity. It's the lack of completeness when it comes to her explanation on her flip-flops and where she stands on issues. They're trying to pretend that the issue is that a bunch of guys just can't vote for a woman. That's false, right? The problem is that they've misdiagnosed this from the jump. And they keep thinking it's a bunch of guys that just can't get over this hurdle of voting for a woman. In fact, it's with her. She fundamentally is a flawed candidate. That's the problem.
That's exactly right. And that's
for so many Democrats, this is the frustrating thing. There are so many voters open to her that almost want to be given permission to vote for her. They are telling us exactly what is on their mind. It is the economy, and it is, kind of safety, whether it's chaos overseas, immigration, and yet they don't speak to that. And that is what is so frustrating for so many Democrats.
That's the theme, Mark, of what we just played, whether it's Barack Obama trying to shame black men into voting for her, saying you're sexist, that's why you don't want to. And then this outreach, quote unquote, to men to vote. See, I'm a real man. I cry at movies and I'm going to vote for Kamala Harris. Like they're obviously sensing that there's an issue. And even on the New York Times, The Daily podcast yesterday morning, there was a little dance around, oh, it's extra hard for her because she's a woman and she's got to overcome, these inherent biases that people have against her. And to me, that smells like losing.
Yeah. So I'm working on a list, 2 lists, actually. If Trump loses, what his people are going to say, why he lost, and if she loses. Okay. And I compiled this list, not off the top of my head, but from talking to Democrats who are already worried that she's going to lose, right? So the big thing will be to blame Joe Biden for staying in the race, right? Another thing will be misogyny. Another will be racism. Another will be that the media wasn't tough enough on Trump. But what it comes back to go back on what Sean was saying, the Biden-Harris record on the issues most important to voters is unpopular. She's failed to distance herself from that. She's failed to explain how she would be a good steward of a good economy. She's failed to convince people that she's being straightforward about her policy changes. And she's not really confronted a lot of the commander-in-chief issues. That problem, that set of problems can only be dealt with by her, not by videos, not by Barack Obama, not by Bill Clinton. These things that they're trying are tactical efforts to chip away at some of her problems. But only she can address the real problems. And if they continue to say, oh, the electoral college is a horrible thing, or oh, we're still a racist and sexist country, I think her chances of winning go down appreciably.
Well, that's what Tim Walz said. He at a fundraiser said he wants to get rid of the electoral college. I mean, the truth is a lot of Democrats do because they often win the popular vote. Not always, but they often win the popular vote given the population of our cities. It tends to lean left. And there's been a lot of polls that have shown they want to get rid of it, but it's never going to happen given what you'd have to do to the Constitution to get rid of it. So, yeah, Tim Walz was at a fundraiser and said this. And then he was asked about the fact that he said it. And again, like didn't it's very easy to say, you know what, the polls show a majority of Americans are with me. But, obviously, given the hurdles to getting it done, it's a pipe dream. But this is why I believe in it. I mean, that would have been a fine answer. But here's what he said instead.
I want to go back to something you said on Tuesday. You said, I think all of us know the Electoral College needs to go. But the campaign came out later that night, and they said that's not their stance.
Yeah. Well, it's not the campaign's position. And the point I'm trying to make is that there's folks that feel every vote must count in every state. Mm-hmm. And I think some of folks feel that's not the case. Our campaign does that. And the point I'm saying is I'm in 5 states in 2 days. We're out there making the case that the campaign's position is clear, that that's not their position. Their position and my position is to make sure that everybody understands their vote, no matter what state they're in, matters.
So that's something that you and Vice President Harris disagree on?
I have spoken about it in the past, that she's been very clear on this, and the campaign, and my position is the campaign's position.
I mean, once again, he's got his broom out, and he's doing his cleanup in aisle 7, guys.
Well, can I just 2 things? One, he needs to get his pronouns right? He keeps like the campaign, they, them. It's his campaign. It's Harris Walz. So let's get your pronouns straight. It's your campaign. It's not they, them. So the idea that somehow he's like, yeah, I checked with they, them later, and I guess that's not one of our positions doesn't make a ton of sense. That's the first thing. The second thing is, look, this goes back to what we've all been saying. The number 1 and number 2 issues are the economy, inflation, all that subset that goes with it, and the immigration issue, right? And what is he talking about? The Electoral College. Dude, they cannot, just get on message, answer the mail. People care about this. They're Kamala curious because they want to know what you'll do. They know who Trump is, and they're willing to give her a shot. And they're like, how about we talk about paint drying? Would you like to hear about paint drying? They will talk about anything except for the issues that matter and what would give them a shot. It is mind-blowing to me how tone-deaf these guys are when it comes to the issues that matter to voters.
I was a Democratic fundraiser for 10 years. I spent a lot of time in, people's living rooms and kitchens. This is the classic case of it's big in the base right? They're trying to convince themselves like we really would win if the rules were fair, like, and he just put out there, playing to them. It's ridiculous. There's 30 days left. You're down in the race. It's super close. To Sean's point, there are issues that voters are at the top of their mind that could help you persuade people. And this is just kind of living in the Democratic base, fantasy world of, patting themselves on the back that if the rules were fair, in their opinion, we'd win. It's ridiculous.
It's true. I told the audience last year, my then 8th grade boy debated this very issue at school. Should we keep the electoral college? Shouldn't we? That's fine. That's exactly where that debate belongs. Not in the last 25 days of the actual presidential race, Tim Walz. You mentioned how the blame game will go, Mark Halperin, and I agree with you to some extent.
Hey, Megyn, what side was your son on, by the way? Just out of curiosity.
Keep the electoral college or we're going to break up the union. All right. And I do think that there will be internal factions on both sides that are like this. So if she loses, you're going to have a large portion of Democrats saying it shouldn't have been her. I wrote an op-ed. I said we should have an open primary. She's not the strongest for the job. And they'll be pointing the finger at the other side of the Democratic Party that pushed, responsible for the so-called coup, right? And on the Republican side, it'll be the same. We told you Trump couldn't do it. His negatives are too high. We should have done DeSantis, whatever. So there's going to be infighting with either party. But I do think on the Dem side, it's going to be very hard to get past Kamala Harris's unique flaws and challenges as a candidate, as a communicator. So last night, she goes to a town hall with Univision, which is on her side. This should have been very easy. And she gives her pre-rehearsed opening statement. This wasn't even in response to a question. This is just like, hey, let me make my case to you before we get started. It's the same filler, fluffy nothingness that we have been listening to for weeks now. Here's a sample.
I think it is important that leadership recognizes the dignity to which each person is entitled, that leadership is about understanding the importance of lifting people up, understanding that the character of our country is such that we are a people who have ambitions, aspirations, dreams, goals for ourselves and our families, and are entitled to have a leader who then invests in that. The two visions, simply put, are that one is about the future and the other is about the past and taking us backward. And I do believe that the American people are ambitious and aspirational about an investment in the future in a way that we are optimistic while being clear-eyed.
I can't, Mark. Please, when November 5th cannot come soon enough. This is all she ever says. Those words, those same words. Who told her just say, is that the Barack Obama campaign? Hope, 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 hope. Like she just thinks saying ambitions and aspirations and dreams over and over and over again. We've done forensic deconstructions of all of her interviews is the way forward.
It's a word salad without a lot of ingredients. Just like the same 6 ingredients over and over again. Look, the two things that amaze me are, one, this is the exact same person who several months ago, Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, most Democratic donors, most Democratic strategists would have said, if we replace Joe Biden, obviously it can't be with Kamala Harris, because that's not a great trade. And second, this is the same press corps that covered up for several years for Joe Biden, who's now covering her. And while the coverage of her in the last couple of weeks has gotten a little bit tougher, and Bill Whitaker's interview was by far the toughest one she's faced, it's still the case that she's now likely to get Election Day without the dominant media, to use David Pluff's phrase, putting her in the barrel. She's lost some news cycles, but she hasn't had a single crisis. And just as the press went along watching Joe Biden, clearly not with the same cognitive abilities he had several years ago, they're just going along covering this like nothing's happening here, that her events are fine, and that she's doing what she needs to do. Maybe she'll win, But no one I know, including a lot of Democrats who are honest about her performance level, think that performance level is good enough to win.
So what do you think, Dan, is causing the stall? I've heard you guys talking about, she stalled, and is she stalled and tied, or is she stalled and behind? And it seemed like you had a consensus on your show that she was stalled and behind. What do you think is causing that? Because we all saw the rocket ship go up when she subbed in, and Brat, Summer, and the DNC with all their stars, and Democrats were feeling the way Republicans were feeling after their convention before the switcheroo had happened. So what happened?
Yeah, I believe she is stalled and behind. And what has happened is when she started this media blitz earlier in the week, it seemed like the game plan was to not make news, to kind of just, get through it. Don't put your foot in your mouth. She obviously did on the answer about what she would do differently than Joe Biden. But that's a stance that you take when you have the lead, when you're trying to run the clock out and just, to use a football analogy, not turn the ball over. But instead, you need to be forcing turnovers and putting points on the board. And I think, I actually thought she did well in the town hall. We can debate that kind of opening. I thought as it went on, she relaxed. She had some very good answers, but they're not penetrating. She's not having anything new to say. And here we are, we were talking earlier about young black men, Barack Obama. We're talking about how she didn't make news yesterday. What's the one thing Donald Trump did yesterday? He gives a speech in Detroit. We can talk about, whether or not some of it was a little off the rails, but he proposes a tax cut for an auto loan, which hits people right in their pocketbooks, right? Like, I'd rather be him today, according to Black Vote, than the Democrats, which makes me want to pull my hair out. And so I think, you have to change, the foot you're on from your back foot to your front foot. And you need to be winning news cycles because you have to stop Trump's momentum. If you look right now in the blue wall states, I know you talked about it on your show yesterday, it's not just that she's behind by 2 or 3 points. Okay, things go up and down. The trend lines the last 3 weeks are all in Trump's favor. You have to stop that, because if 2 or 3 becomes 4 or 6, you haven't seen anything in terms of Democratic panic.
Yeah, if I could just add, look.
Yeah, go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, Dan's absolutely right. It's the trend line, right? It's not one poll or 2 polls. When she came out of the convention, you looked at the Real Clear Politics average of polls in the states. It was Harris, 1-3, 1-3. Then a lot of them went to tie. Now it's Trump. So the shift in a lot of these states is left to right. And that's concerning for them in each of these battleground states, probably save Nevada. But Tim Hogan, our former colleague, had a great anecdote that really surmised what was happening after, when Biden got pushed out. People kept saying, well, God, what? People don't like Kamala Harris. What do we do? And he said, imagine it's raining and your coworker has a car when you walk out of the office and says, hop in my car, I'll drive you. You're excited. You may not like the coworker, but you're like, hey, they've got a car. It's pouring rain. It's dry in the car. I'll get in the ride. The problem is that as the car ride goes on, Kamala Harris is that passenger that won't stop talking. And you're like, you know what? At some point, just get out. I need to get out of this car. And, that what you just played about the Univision town hall exemplifies it. People were willing to give her a chance. They were willing to engage in conversation with her, but she has shunned them basically since, the convention. People thought there'd be something more. There'd be more substance. There'd be more explanation. There'd be more there. And there's not. And they're coming to the realization that I was willing to give somebody else a chance, another look. I was willing to be curious about her. But I know what I'm getting with Trump, and the biggest issues that I'm concerned about, the economy, the immigration. I know the Trump record. I may not like everything he says and does, but at the end of the day, I'm way too concerned about where she'll ultimately come out, so I'll fold with Trump. And we're seeing that in focus group after focus group. They've waited long enough, and they're saying, you know what? I gave her a shot. I got to go with Trump.
Mark, I watch her, and I can't help but think she's no Obama. Obama 2008, which is what they're wanting us to feel that she is. Obama was all about hope and change. We all remember that. But Obama could sell it like nobody's business. He really was a once in a generation political talent, whether you agree with his policies or not, that you can't dispute. And he was selling specific things. I was there. He was talking about Obamacare what would become Obamacare and changing people's lives. He was talking about the Iraq War and making a point about how it needed to end. He voted against it, all of that. He was talking about the environment. I mean, who could forget the seas will open, whatever, however he put it. I guess I did forget, but in Des Moines, Iowa, when he was running, like, he made these grandiose promises on the environment and things that people loved. She's so myopic. It's like first-time home buyers are going to get this little tax break. And the people who are diabetics are going to do better on their monthly insulin. And price gouging is going to stop at the grocery store. But there's been a lot of counter-programming on that, even from leftist news organizations saying there is no price gouging happening at grocery stores. So it's like, she's not it. And she really, really wants us to believe she's it, with the ambitions and the aspirations and the dream talk, which is incessant.
I'll say again, I think she can win. And I think she's got, because she's showing strength in the Sunbelt states, she's got multiple paths now rather than just one for now. I think, is she as skilled a candidate as the last two Democratic nominees? I just don't think she is, compared to Hillary Clinton or compared to Barack Obama or Bill Clinton. I don't think she's as skilled even as John Kerry, because she had to do this from a standing start. She's not been on the national stage very long. So I think that's one issue. She's just not proficient. Number two, her Achilles heel is that she's indecisive. And she's at a time when, if she's going to win, she needs to take the whole campaign and 57 or 47% of the country plus, put them on her back and win it. And as an indecisive person with decisions to make every day, that's the Achilles heel. And then lastly, I think sometimes we overlook this. She's the most liberal person to be the Democratic nominee by a lot. And this is not a super liberal country. It's a centrist country. And the voters she's trying to win over are centrists. And by being vague and evasive about what she actually believes, particularly on issues like the economy and trans issues, she is letting people say, I don't like Trump, but I can't vote for something that's such a question mark. And we have people who come on the morning meeting and say, I can't vote for someone who's insulting my intelligence by not addressing these things. She had a short campaign, but she spends a lot of days with one or two events and some days with no events. And some voters read that as a failure to respect the responsibility she has in a short campaign to go the extra mile, working round the clock to explain things to people. And she's not done it to many voters' satisfaction.
To ask for the job by explaining her positions to the people she wants to hire her. I mean, that was one of my frustrations in the 60 interview. It's true that Bill Whitaker did a better job than those who came before him, but that is truly like being the thinnest kid at fat camp. He asked her very fair questions about policy, about foreign policy, and she just kept saying, I'm not going to answer a hypothetical. Like it's a deposition. You can get away with that in a deposition. Totally fine answer in a deposition. She's interviewing for the most important job in the world. We're entitled to answers on that. Diplomatic answers. Sure, you don't have to commit to a specific strategy, but you can give us the framework that you would attack the issue of Iran and China and Taiwan and Ukraine and so on with. She didn't. Just a little bit of news here. The Daily Mail had an interesting report. They went and pulled her performance reviews from right after she was San Francisco DA. And they found that when she was in her very next position, she did not get the greatest reviews for things along the lines that you just touched on, Mark Halperin, interestingly. They write, although she and her team got favorable ratings for the quality of their work and creativity in the advice and understanding problems, they got less favorable marks for other important metrics. On a scale of 1 to 5, Harris only got a 2 on whether she was thorough, helpful, and proactive, only a 3 on whether she had good judgment. She also got a 2 for recognizing deadlines, fast turnaround, and anticipating their needs. It's kind of interesting. Even more embarrassing was her failure to return phone calls and emails promptly. I mean, I think that's kind of interesting given the critiques you just raised about, like, does she understand it's crunch time? Does she understand she's got to make decisions, pedal to the metal, it's go time? And I don't know. I mean, maybe she does, Dana, we're being too tough on her, and she thinks go time means call her daddy and Howard Stern and all the rest of it.
Yeah, I think what's concerning for Democrats, I mean, go back to Mark's earlier statement about if Democrats could have picked a candidate this summer in a vacuum, it would not have been Kamala Harris. In her 2019 campaign, this is what she exhibited. She has that first great debate against Joe Biden where she kind of attacks him about school busing. And then in the next debate, she's asked a question that everybody knew was coming, Elizabeth Warren's Medicare for All. And she, twists herself in a pretzel. And then for the next couple of months, can't clean it up, can't get back on a front foot. And I think people gave her some slack when this campaign first started. You get out of the gate fast, you're filling arenas with 15,000 people, you pick a vice president, you have a convention. To Sean's point, everyone then thought you're going to start filling in the blanks. Mark has done some excellent focus groups that we've talked about on the morning meeting. Every focus group of undecided voters, they say, I want to hear more from her on the economy, how she would handle overseas conflicts. Like, the data is screaming, this is what people want. And yet the strategy seems to be, don't make news. As you say, it's like school uniforms with Bill Clinton in 1996. I'm going to expand the child, tax credit. I'm going to make it easier to purchase a home and to start a small business. But if you're that American Pie family, you have 2 kids, you own your home, you're not going to have more kids. There's nothing in those 3 things she's talking about that appeals to you, right? You already own your home. You're not going to go start a small business maybe at this point in your career. So what is it that you're, saying to them or to the young Black man to make them want to vote for you? And this is why people are getting very nervous. She's playing to her character form of just being very cautious and don't make a mistake. When you're in California, it's fine, but you have to defeat Donald Trump, not hope that he loses this.
Megyn, one of the things that Dan pointed out, we've talked about this probably ad nauseum on the morning meeting. She's got a lot of smart people around her, right? They have a ton of money and a ton of data. They know exactly what we just said, which is, here's what you need to do. And the only conclusion that makes sense to draw is she can't do it, right? It's at some point, it was like the people who said Joe Biden needs to do the following. And we just knew that cognitively and physically, he just couldn't do it. He's got smart people around him too. At some point, the folks around her, they know what she should and could do to help close the deal. They've come to the conclusion that she just can't do it. And so therefore, they've pivoted and found other ways. They're really relying on paid media this cycle in a way that I've never seen a candidate have to, because she is incapable of going out and doing those interviews that don't result in us playing the clips afterwards. We go, look at how she answered the following question that should have been a layup.
The only thing
especially
harder,
I will say as a recovering lawyer myself, there's no way she doesn't know how to argue. I mean, there's just no way she doesn't know how to. This is what you do, especially as a prosecutor. You go in there and you do battle. The stuff that makes, the sexy headlines are the trials and the openings and the closings, although I don't know how much of that she did. There's been an empty effort to find the trial transcripts and the proof of exactly what cases, if any, she tried. But for sure, you stand in front of a judge and you make an argument against somebody who's telling the judge you're an idiot. I mean, that's really the core of what lawyers do. You fight rhetorically. Why can't she do that? Why doesn't she put herself down in front of an arguer, an adverse interviewer, and go toe to toe? That's exactly the kind of thing that might generate news headlines, Mark, and get her some positive press.
in part because, again, she's so risk averse. She's so indecisive. She doesn't like making mistakes and paying a price for them. She doesn't like alienating any group of voters. And so if you do that and you're not that confident in your performance, and we saw after the Lester Holt interview where she said, I haven't been to Europe, she stopped doing interviews. She does not like to fail in the public realm. She doesn't like people upset with her. The only thing harder than covering Donald Trump as a journalist is running against him. It's very difficult to run against him because he gets in your head. He insults you. He says provocative things. He has the record January 6th, etc. Running against him takes a superior political athlete. The only one who beat him was Joe Biden, and that was the conditions of COVID in a very unorthodox situation. Otherwise, he beat every Republican. He beat Hillary Clinton. He's very complicated to run against. It takes a great political athlete, and she's not demonstrated that is her, and her past political career does not demonstrate that.
That's so true. And you look at, one of the things I'm noticing is today I got all my favorite websites. Every single headline is about Trump and it's negative, which is good for him. That's just so weird, but that's a difficult position for her. Even when the headlines are terrible for your opponent, it's good for your opponent. It's just Trump with his earned media. I don't know how that works exactly, but I know it works. We've watched it now, in particular in 2016. The stuff doesn't seem to hurt him, and most people can see that it's mostly nonsense. But there's a lot more to go over. This Tim Walz interview and this Doug Emhoff interview and Trump ripping on Detroit while he's in Detroit, Michigan is another thing we need to discuss. Stand by. We'll be right back. You know how much my family and I love our dogs, right? Yes, even Strudwick. Can't imagine life without them. They have a great life, but some dogs are not so lucky. And that's why I'm so glad to tell you about Delta Rescue, the largest no-kill, care-for-life animal sanctuary in the world. They've rescued thousands of dogs, plus cats and horses too. They provide all the animals with shelter and safety, and most of all, love. And they've been doing it for more than 45 years now. Delta Rescue relies solely on contributions, and giving can bring tax benefits to you too. Speak with your estate planner about how you can grow your estate while helping animals in need. And check out the estate planning tab on their website to learn more. We love Thunder and Strudwick, but would love for other dogs who need shelter and a home and attention and care to find it too. Visit deltarescue.org today to learn more. That's deltarescue.org.
If we are willing to work for it and fight for it and believe in it, then I am absolutely certain that generations from now, we will be able to look back and tell our children that this was the moment when we began to provide care for the sick and good jobs to the jobless. This was the moment when the rise of the oceans began to slow and our planet began to heal. This was the moment when we ended a war and secured our nation and restored our image as the last best hope on earth.
That one was for you, Dan. That was for you. Welcome back to the Megyn Kelly Show. Mark Halperin, Sean Spicer, and Dan Turrentine are here. They host the morning meeting, which you can check out live every morning on the Two-Way YouTube channel. You see my point? That was St. Paul. I had it right, except it was St. Paul, Minnesota, not Des Moines, Iowa. There's only one Barack Obama, and neither Josh Shapiro nor Kamala Harris can be Barack Obama. You know, it's you can talk about hopes and dreams and aspirations, but no one could sell it the way he could. It's just a different animal altogether. Just want to take you down their memory lane because that was a rough hour, Dan.
Yeah, yes, it was. And he's a little grayer now.
Yeah. And a lot more like, I guess I shouldn't say more preachy because he was a little preachy there, but a lot more sort of sanctimonious and bossy than he used to be. Okay. Now I want to talk about Tim Walz because Tim Walz is also out on the new media tour and trying to help her when he's not defending his comments on the Electoral College. And he sits down with Michael Strahan, who's the best thing ABC has going. And Strahan actually asks him about his many, many lies. There's a much longer list than actually came up, but he did raise it to his credit. Here's how that went in SOT 8.
You've made some statements that just aren't true. And the comment about weapons of war that I carried in war, which you didn't. You said that you were in Hong Kong during the Tiananmen Square massacre when you weren't. You kind of chalked it all up to bad grammar or getting the dates wrong.
Yeah.
But your opponents say you lied to make yourself look better. Do they have a point?
Well, look, 35 years ago, got the opportunity to be in Hong Kong, be in China, learned a lot about it, served 24 years in the National Guard, passionately, in an instance, talking about gun violence in schools, on an instance there, proud of the service that I've done, proud to be a teacher in that classroom, proud to have been very public all these years, and owning it when I, said, look, I was there in August of '89. And I think the policies, whether it be dealing with China and understanding China's human rights record, what you can be certain there is that Kamala Harris and I aren't going to, pick dictators on speed dial.
Well, but it's one of the things with trust. So there are going to be some people who say, we can't trust him to even tell the truth about himself.
Yeah.
What do you say to them?
Well, I said they know who I am. I know who I am. I know the work that I've done. I know that things get spun in a political environment.
And Vice President Harris said that she told you to be a little bit more careful on how you say things.
Well, I did it, even the other day of just speaking passionately about these gun violence situations and meeting with these survivors. I wear my emotions on my sleeve, and I do think in these positions, whether it be governor or being Vice President of the United States, you do need to be careful. You do need to be a little more thoughtful on it.
Okay, guys, I will submit to you that the American people are not dumb. And I would submit to you that the American people will look over "I'm friends with school shooters," which he said in that vice presidential debate as him misspeaking. Everyone will give him that grace. But it's not going to work on this litany of other lies, because you don't misspeak over and over and over and over again the very same way, which is to make you look better on multiple subjects, and the American people continue with the grace. It's just not how lies work. That Tiananmen Square thing, we've gone over this with the audience, but we found another instance of him doing it on camera. We had told the audience about this earlier, and we had only had the written transcript of it, but we have since found the on-camera version. And here is the latest offering. This is from a May 2014 congressional hearing where CNN's K-File had highlighted this, but again, without a link to the actual sound. It was a hearing for the Congressional Executive Commission on China. And take a listen to how he described where he was when Tiananmen Square happened in 1989.
It certainly had an enduring influence on me. As a young man, I was just going to teach high school in Fosan in Guangdong, and was in Hong Kong in May of 89. And as the events were unfolding, several of us went in, and I still remember the train station in Hong Kong. It was a large number, especially European, I think, very angry that we would still go after what had happened.
And that, of course, was not the only time. Here's a little walk down memory lane. Watch.
Yeah, I was in Hong Kong, so we were the first group of American high school teachers to teach in Chinese high school. So, but I was in Hong Kong when it happened. I was in Hong Kong on June 4th when Tiananmen happened. Right. I was in Hong Kong on June 4th, 1989, when, of course, Tiananmen Square happened.
And on, because we could go through the written record of it, too. So you tell me, Sean Spicer, whether I'm right in my theory about the American people.
Absolutely. Look, I'll say this. Among the four of us, I have the most expertise at screwing up and making mistakes at the highest levels. So I think I'm somewhat of an expert when it comes to some of these things. And there's a big difference between making a mistake, getting somebody's name wrong, and lying. Right? And we have allowed the media to talk to us about how much Donald Trump and everyone on the right lies and spreads misinformation. He lied about being in Tiananmen Square. And I'm sorry, you don't go, you know what, the more I thought about it, it was the Target in Edina. Like, Tiananmen Square during a high-profile event like that is pretty notable. You don't go, you know, you were right, I wasn't there. He lied about IVF. He lied about receiving a Chamber of Commerce award in Nebraska. He lied about his rank as a military official. And I'm sorry, as somebody who has actually done that, like served, you don't lie about your rank the way that he did. You lied about carrying weapons of war. It's a pattern. He's a fabulist. He lies about everything. And for some reason, we excuse this to bad grammar and I'm a knucklehead. He is a pattern of lying, and no one else seems to call him on it. They just excuse it. You saw Strahan ask the question, as you pointed out, but there's no follow-up. I mean, he gets away with it and says, yeah, you know, I use bad grammar. Bad grammar is which, not that. Not lying about where you were in China versus Minnesota.
It would be so great to follow up and actually say, come on, Governor, you would know if you were in Tiananmen Square, if you were in China when Tiananmen Square happened. Just like you know if you're in southern Manhattan on the day of 9/11, just like you knew if you were at Pearl Harbor on D-Day. You know if you are actually there or not. You're really asking this audience to believe you just mixed up the dates? That's the follow-up. And by the way, on the retired Command Sergeant Major matter, that's the one to zero in on. Because that, he said, I think we counted over a dozen times. I mean, that one is really kind of his favorite, to say that he's a retired Command Sergeant Major. That really is a stolen valor situation where he elevated his rank inappropriately. And there's no way he can get away with, I misspoke. I mean, if I interviewed Tim Walz, I'd have it on my phone. I would press play and I would say, you really want us to believe that that's all bad grammar? That's all you speaking passionately? You didn't understand that you never attained that rank? You didn't do the work. You didn't do the training. And you didn't rightly have that title, sir. See what he says then. It doesn't, you actually don't have to be Megyn Kelly, who's a former litigator, to do it. You just have to be a good journalist. Dan, you take it.
Megyn, there's an old expression that my wife likes to use, which is, pardon my language, if you have to eat shit, don't nibble. And he just keeps nibbling around and around in circles. As you say, if it was just one of these things, you could kind of tap dance and like try to move on. But to Sean's point, it's so prevalent. Just go to the character issue. And as Democrats, we would rather talk about the fact that Trump has trouble with the truth and like all of this stuff. And you completely undercut yourself when your own vice president is constantly having to explain one thing after the other. And all he can say is, I'm a knucklehead, and it's all over Saturday Night Live. I mean, even they're laughing at him.
I'm a knucklehead was not a great headline for them coming out of the debate. I realized they wanted to focus more on 2020. But does that limit, would you say, Mark, Tim Walz's ability to really go out there and be a surrogate for her? Not necessarily on the campaign trail, but when he's dealing with a reporter. Because now enough reporters have seen the litany that they do feel compelled to ask about it.
I think I need to recuse myself from this one because I, too, was in Hong Kong the day of the Tiananmen Square attack. So, look, he has trouble with the truth. And you could say it's psychotic, or you could say it's purposeful and conniving. But the reality is people don't vote for the bottom of the ticket. And although he is asked about it in that interview, and although it's in the, the crevices of stories about him, people aren't focused on him. The press is still pro-Harris enough that it's not going to be what it should be, and what should also be for Donald Trump, which is they both picked guys who are on the bubble of, is this person ready to be president? They both picked people about whom a lot of Americans have doubts, but I don't think they're escalating or have escalated or will escalate to the point where this will be a voting issue. He doesn't get covered very much. J.D. Vance doesn't get covered very much. It's the normal rhythm. As long as you clear the bar, ready to be president, and that's the perception by the press, and I think a lot of the public, it's not top of mind. So I think it'd be scary to a lot of people if he became president, if he hadn't proven to people that there's an explanation here that's comforting, because it's not comforting to watch those videos. But I don't think it's going to impact the race.
J.D. Vance, I think, proved that he's up to the job at that vice presidential debate. However, he still has a hurdle to overcome when it comes to likability, given the way the press went for him when he first was launched as the second half of the ticket. And he's working on it. I will give a shout out to our pals over at the Ruthless program, as they call it, who managed to get J.D. Vance out on a fishing boat in Michigan. I think it was Michigan, in a hilarious bit that they just dropped on their YouTube channel, where just the audience knows these guys very well because they come on regularly. They split up Josh Holmes with JD from Smug and Duncan and Ashbrook, and they were in a fishing competition. The two boats went out, and let's just say Smug and crew were not entirely above board when it came to the vote count. Let's watch. It's Smug reeling in a fish.
Oh, no.
JD looking
Buddy,
confused.
They got a fish over there. Oh, no. Oh, no. That is a dead fish. Look at that fish. It's a dead fish. It doesn't count. It's a dead fish. It has to be alive. I think the thing's frozen. Smug, get that net out there.
Smug's reeling it in.
JD's got to get out there. I'd like a hand recount of that fish because none of us think that fish is actually alive. Ballot harvesting over here. Let me see this guy.
Ballot harvesting.
He's a little cold. He may have been He may have been They actually got a frozen fish. You guys are so full of shit. When I saw it, I was like, that fish is not moving. This is like the hanging Chad of fishing competitions. No, this ballot's rejected.
I'm sorry, but that's just too good, Dan. He was there with his son, too. I mean, that anybody who watches that is going to have to smile.
I mean, look, that's excellent. It's humanizing. You just relax when you watch it and you're sitting there, chuckling. One thing, Megyn, just to go back to what you were saying, not to kind of end a good story here, is I think the one place that Walz, could have had an impact is he was picked for his communication skills, amongst other reasons, right? He was on TV over the summer. He kind of got hot at the right time. He had the whole weird comment that went viral. I think one of the things that his constant misstatements has caused is they're less comfortable putting him out there to press the case. And we go back to when you're trailing, you need everybody on the team in the game playing their best. And they are a little hesitant to put him out there. I mean, he's only done a handful of interviews because they don't want him to have to explain this stuff. So
but just juxtapose that to JD, right? He's everywhere. He's at the Ruthless podcast. He's on ABC, CNN. You can put JD Vance in any environment right now, media-wise, enemy territory or not, and he comes across well. He hasn't had one forced error in this cycle. Everything that they've dug up on JD is in the past, right? He is playing pitch perfect. He handles interviews well. And to Dan's point, you want your surrogates. This is something we talk about on the morning meeting quite often, but you want your surrogates to be pushing the needle forward for you, to selling your case. And right now, they've taken who they thought should be their strongest surrogate, and they've got to now figure out what to do with the guy. Whereas JD Vance, he's going to be on the Sunday shows this Sunday. He's out there doing all of these, whether it's a podcast or CNN, he'll go do anything. He's like Mikey. You can send him. He likes it all.
Well, the reality is,
go ahead.
The reality is, Vance didn't have a particularly quote unquote good night at the debate. That's JD Vance. And Walz didn't have a particularly bad night. That seems to be who he is. Debating's not the end of it, but it was quite revealing of their skills and of their readiness to be on the big stage. JD is newer to politics, but he's an incredibly intellectually gifted guy, an incredibly articulate guy, and he understands the agenda of the ticket. Walz doesn't understand the agenda ticket because it's not clear that she does yet.
Right.
That's true. And you see that lack of confidence on him when he's out there being asked questions, like he doesn't want to get ahead of her. It's even when the American hostages were killed by Hamas, he didn't even want to offer the word of like, God, I'm so sorry to hear that when they got him at that state fair. He didn't want to say anything before she says it. It's like, you can be a human. You can say, that's terrible. Oh my God, fellow Americans. I mean, my heart goes out to the families, and leave it at that. Anyway, go ahead, Dan. What were you going to say?
Well, I was just going to say, here we are, we're 30 days out. You're looking for every vote under every rock that you can find. JD Vance was picked for the Rust Belt, for rural areas, and look at what he's doing. If I watch that, I have more confidence that he's helping me get votes where I need them, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, than JD Vance was yesterday, right? Every day you are trying to win. And JD Vance, I mean, in my opinion, he's made some pretty big misstatements. He's got some problem with favorable, unfavorables with women. But what he was picked for, he is delivering. I mean, I can say that, with a straight face. He's been very effective.
But Tim Walz is sidelining himself as all of these lies have come out. I mean, it's serial. I think the guy's pathological. However, there could be a savior, Mark Halperin. There could be a savior to come in and do the work that Tim Walz is not able to do. And that is another Democratic favorite who goes by the name Gretchen Whitmer. Now, she happens to be the governor of Michigan. She's very popular there. And she was on the short list for possibilities when Joe totally willingly bowed out. And I don't know what this is. Maybe you guys are going to be able to explain it to me. But she did some sort of a little video with somebody I have never seen or heard of before. Hold on. My trusty notes tell me that it's an MSNBC columnist named Liz Plank involving a Dorito. Here it is. She's feeding the Dorito to this Liz Plank. Whitmer is wearing a Harris Walz cap. Now, I don't understand it. You're going to tell me what it means. The Daily Caller says the clip is vaguely pornographic and that it also treats the Dorito as if it were the Holy Eucharist. You don't want to read pornographic and Holy Eucharist in the same. You know what? They're not wrong.
Not if you're trying to win a presidential campaign. There are other contexts in which you just fine. Look, politics is about emotion, and it's about getting your people energized to vote, to get other people to vote, to give money, to fill social media with outrage and indignation. And part of what the Democrats don't understand, I think, about why it's so hard to run against Donald Trump, because the Trump movement will take that video and it will be a net positive, energizing, talking about it as weird, as anti-Catholic. Okay. And I can tell you that without fear of being wrong, that video will help Donald Trump way more than it will help Kamala Harris, even though it was made by one of Kamala Harris's main supporters. And it puts into sharp relief something that the Harris campaign had taken away from the Trump campaign. During her initial honeymoon, the Trump advantage that he had over Biden of dominating social media was taken away because her team launched really well on social with energy and joy and all the things that they were producing. This video and the way it's been manipulated and deployed by the right is part of a resurgence of energy and creativity in social media by the Trump forces that I think is restored to some extent. It's a hard thing to measure the advantage he had there, and don't underestimate that advantage, because social media produces a lot of energy in our politics today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as I said, Whitmer's wearing a Harris Walz hat. I mean, obviously this is meant to be, I don't know. I mean, Kamala Harris says she loves Doritos, so like I really don't even get it. Seems kind of dumb to me.
That was the worst start. That was the worst start of a sentence in the history of broadcasting, because you said like what it clearly means. No one knows what that means. It's impossible to know what that means.
That's how I feel about everything Kamala Harris does. I never understand. She says she's going to make me, but then she doesn't. I put this in the same category as I put the Vogue magazine spread, Sean, that just came out, giving her sort of the Michelle Obama treatment or Jill Biden treatment, where they try to make her into a superstar spokesmodel. Now, first of all, this is as airbrushed as a Joan Rivers appearance on any magazine or TV. This is that Kamala Harris looks 39 instead of 59 here. I will submit, as the sole woman on this show today, that was a mistake. You want her to have gravitas. She's running for a very important job, and as the first potential female president, just let her have the lines. Fucking Vogue, let her have the lines. The lines are not a problem you have to erase for women who are serious and asking for a serious job. She wants to be in command of our Navy SEALs. So stop with the airbrushing. It's annoying to me. And what, man, it's just like on a separate tear. What message does it send to little girls? You can become president just as long as you don't age, okay? You can't age because as a woman, you have to be both hot and credible. Like, fuck off, Vogue. This is Anna Wintour, who judges us all by our stupid fashion. And honestly, like right now, she's launching the Met Gala theme right now. Guess what it is? Black men and dandyism. What is that? I don't like, it was, as somebody tweeted out, this is a great way to get a bunch of out-of-touch celebrities canceled in one fell swoop. True. Anyway, it's annoying. So she does the Vogue thing, Sean. And the Vogue reporter, I mean, it'll make you throw up a little in your mouth. The headline is, "The Candidate for Our Times." Okay, here's just a little. Here's a little bit. Okay. Stand by. There's so much to choose from. I asked her what her first call would be on reaching the Oval Office. "One of my first calls outside of family will be to the team that is working with me on our plan to lower costs for the American people." What does that mean? Who's on that team? How are they going to do that? That's exciting. Great. That's something people will talk about over the kitchen table tonight. Then he goes on to write, and by the way, the writer's name is Nathan Heller. "When Biden's announcement caused that pulse to drop a beat, the world looked to Harris with hopes and doubts. Now at her dining room table with pizza boxes, a trusted, unbathed staff, and a phone, she was being called on to do something unprecedented in American history, to mount and win a presidential race in 3 months as a woman of color with a felonious former leader as the opposition, and the future of democracy said to be at stake." Your thoughts, Sean?
Two things. One, she's largely kept gender and race out of this, and I think, which was a positive thing for her campaign, right? Which I think was smart, because the idea was let it stand. Everyone knows you're a woman. Everyone knows you're of color. So unlike Hillary Clinton, you don't have to make it a big deal. It's obvious to those people who it matters to, those qualities that you have. But second of all, this goes back to this media blitz that we talked about earlier, right? You're supposed to be doing things that move the needle forward. And I'm not sure what this got you. I mean, I think it might have been a vanity play. Like, hey, we got you a Vogue cover spread, and it was like, awesome, let's go do it. I don't think that this helps you. In fact, to your point, you read these quotes, it probably turns off more people than it helped. The photo spread probably wasn't the strongest to bring people over. It doesn't have that quality of strength, Commander-in-Chief, that you are referring to. I go back to what are you trying to do? And I think that sometimes people get enamored with being on a particular show or doing something as opposed to thinking, does this actually help me strategically get to where I'm going? It's more of a tactic than a strategy. And I think that's what this happened. But it's like going on The View. If you actually move backwards after you do The View and you're a Democratic woman, that says a lot about your strategy.
I mean, aren't we trying to get Black and Latino men? Is this the way? Like, I don't know. Go on GQ. Go on Sports Illustrated. Go someplace where men go, which is not Vogue. I don't get it, Dan.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. I mean, Sean is our resident Vogue expert on the morning meeting, so I think he, said it pretty well. But to your point, at this stage in the game, I mean, I think it's become a tradition. Maybe Doug Emhoff should have been on here as Michelle Obama,
don't get me started.
Joe Biden was. But I think it doesn't do any harm probably, but it certainly doesn't probably help you either. And you need to be doing everything you can at this point to be on offense.
All right, let's talk about the horse race.
The clip that you played with JD, right? That he's out there kind of having fun, showing the personal side of himself. That's what I mean, look, I'm not looking to give them any advice right now, but if I were them, I'd be doing more of that. The personal stuff where you're walking, talking, doing something. But it's even the call her daddy thing. It was in these two chairs. It looked stiff and rehearsed. She wasn't at ease. Find some environments where she actually looks like she's relaxed and relatable, as opposed
like
to these stiff. Yeah, there you go. She can go into
she's
one of
comfortable there. Honestly, Colbert tried to do that. She tried to do that with Colbert with the beer. It felt very uncomfortable and awkward. Go ahead, Mark.
Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah.
Again, if she loses and people start to deconstruct, one of the things Donald Trump makes him so formidable as a candidate is he safeguards his brand. He knows exactly what the positive elements of his brand are, and he cultivates public appearances that allow him to put that brand in sharp relief. Her brand protection.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were done.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Well, they're just you go back to the CNN interview on the bus with Walz and how poorly that was staged. Donald Trump would never have let that happen. And in the things she's done this week, the Vogue thing obviously was in the works, but all these things, you ask yourself, what are the elements of her brand that she's trying to get across by being on the cover of Vogue? I don't know what that is. If you're trying to be a good steward of a good economy and commander-in-chief, what is it about that reinforces what she wants to say about her brand?
I want to talk about the horse race and also the Senate, because I heard you guys interviewing, forgive me, I don't remember her name, but she had worked for she had worked for Vivek's campaign. Lauren, was that her name? Blonde? Trisha. Anyway, she was saying she thinks the Republicans are going to lose that seat in the Nebraska Senate race, which was like, what? I realize in Nebraska right now it's between a Republican and an independent, and the independent is appealing. Like, he's got a military background and he seems more like a man's man, not so much like what we saw in that ad we ran earlier. So I don't know. Like, I do want to talk about the Senate. I guess we might as well just do it now. And then I want to get to Trump and his Detroit comments. Who would like to take on what's going to happen in the U.S. Senate, which gets less attention than it deserves in all these discussions?
Mark, you want to lead?
Well, it's certainly the case that if you were going to Ladbrokes and putting down a $5, you'd bet on the Republicans taking control. They're still defending way more seats, even if you make the map as broad as possible and say all the seats that could be in play. There are 3 that could be in play for the Republicans: Texas and Florida and Nebraska. But if you were going to bet, you'd bet the Republicans will put enough money in them to protect them. There are 3 incumbents, and parties will spend anything they need to spend to protect incumbents. I wouldn't be surprised if one of them lost. I'd be surprised if 2 or more lost. And then on the other side, Democrats are going to lose 1 seat in West Virginia, and Republicans still have legitimate pickup opportunities where the field has expanded now, where Wisconsin joins Michigan, Ohio, Montana, Pennsylvania, Arizona, and potentially and Nevada, all of which are potential pickups. Even Arizona, I think people are writing that off too soon.
Really?
So you just do, and I'm sorry, and then Maryland. So if you look at Democrats would have to hold every one or all but one if Harris wins to keep control of the Senate. It's very unlikely. I'd put Democrats' chances of having the Senate majority right now at about 10%, and that's higher than a lot of people would put it.
You guys agree with that, Dan?
Yeah, that's about 9%. That's about 9% higher than I would give it. Look,
Yeah.
I think Mark's right. The West Virginia seat's a given, right? So you've got Joe Manchin retiring, Jim Justice, the current Republican governor, running. That's a gimme. Everyone admits that. That puts Republicans at 50-50. Montana, you have Tim Sheehy leading the current Democratic incumbent there, John Tester. That's a pickup for us. Then Ohio would probably be next on the list, where Bernie Moreno's challenging the long-term incumbent, Sherrod Brown. I think that's, again, another pickup for us. That gives us 52. I don't necessarily think the Rust Belt, I mean, the Sun Belt, to me, Nevada and Arizona are high on the list, but I would go Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Dave McCormick in Pennsylvania. Mike Rogers, to me, is the sleeper race of the cycle in Michigan, taking on Alyssa Slotkin, a current congresswoman there. I feel like Michigan's moving in our direction for all of the aforementioned reasons that we talked about, why it's in play for the presidential race. And the trend looks great for Mike Rogers. And then Eric Hovde versus Tammy Baldwin in Wisconsin. I think, again, this is a very, very difficult race, but if you look at where Wisconsin has been the last few cycles, not just presidentially, but in 22 as well, it seems to have a really nice tailwind for Republicans in the last few weeks, and it's performing like it has the past couple cycles. So I think that Eric Hovde actually has a really good shot of overtaking Tammy Baldwin. If you take all three of those without even including Arizona and Nevada, that puts Republicans at a 55-seat majority. Now,
or not including Maryland either.
Right. I put Maryland below Arizona. And look, will I be surprised if Larry Hogan beats Angela Brooks? Not entirely, but we'd have to have a spectacular night. Here's my tell, Megyn. If you're watching on election night, Virginia polls where I live close at 7 o'clock. At 9 o'clock, if we're holding our own in Loudoun and Prince William, Northern Virginia, and it looks tight, Republicans are going to have a really good night. If we're losing by over, if Loudoun and Prince William are coming in 56, 57% for Democrats, I think we'll have an okay night.
Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, Megyn, part of the reason there's so much chatter this week about Kamala Harris being in trouble is it is the Senate candidates in the Rust Belt that are beginning to leak and go public and are talking to reporters because they're laying blame, right? It's not Elise Slotkin's fault. It's not Bob Casey's fault. There is an anchor on our, ankles that is pulling us down, that is Kamala Harris. And so you saw in the Wall Street Journal this week, Tammy Baldwin's staff leaked that they have Kamala Harris down 3 points in Wisconsin. The trend lines in those Midwestern Senate competitions are making Democrats very, very nervous. And that is why you're starting to see more and more chatter, because they're going public that it's kind of not us, it's her.
Right. Yeah, that would explain. I heard you guys talking about why would these candidates in Michigan be releasing the news that Kamala Harris is 3 points down in Michigan? Like, how does that help? It only depresses people on the Democratic side, and it's to save themselves, a siren call, help me. Just want to tell the audience that next week we're going to have on three of the guys you mentioned, Sheehy in Montana, McCormick. Oh, this month, Sheehy in Montana, McCormick in Pennsylvania, and Moreno in Ohio. So that'll be interesting to talk to those guys. I mean, they could be our next GOP Senate senators who make all the difference if the Republicans manage to defend enough seats, which you're telling me the odds are that they will. Okay, so Michigan's a big state. We talked about Gretchen Whitmer and her weird pornographic Eucharist Dorito thing. Trump went to Michigan, and so much with Trump, you're like, why? Like when he was ripping on Governor Kemp in Georgia, like, why? But, with Trump, it's like, it's a fool's errand to ask that question. He's doing better in Michigan. He's doing better than he was like a month ago. And then he makes these comments yesterday that rip on Detroit in Detroit. It would be bad anywhere, I think. But he did it in Detroit to a bunch of people who are from Detroit, and here's what happened.
Interest on car loans fully deductible. Where did you come up with that idea? That's the coolest thing. it's like the paperclip again, right? It's like the paperclip. Somebody comes up with a paperclip and everybody says, why the hell didn't I think of that, right? He said, I've been in the car industry all my life. I've never thought about that. So we're going to make it fully deductible, the interest payments. That's going to revolutionize your industry. This is a phenomenal thing, if I do say so myself. I don't think anything that we're talking about today is high on our list. The whole country is going to be like, you want to know the truth? It'll be like Detroit. Our whole country will end up being like Detroit if she's your president. You're going to have a mess on your hands. She destroyed San Francisco. She destroyed, along with Newscomb, California. And we're not going to let her do that to this country. We're not going to let it happen.
Sean, would you care to take that one?
Unfortunately, we're out of time. I'll see you on the next. I mean, hey, it's Donald Trump. Anyway, I don't. Mark, over to you.
I think you're too quick to say that this is politically bad. We've seen time and again when Donald Trump does things. Okay, so you live in Detroit, or how about the Detroit suburbs? Do you have more pride in your city, or do you also have concern that the city, under Democratic rule, has not done particularly well in a lot areas? So
wait, let me just ask you. Let me ask you this question, and then I'll let you finish. Yeah. Do you know people from Detroit? Yeah. I know a lot of people from Detroit. They freaking love their city. They love Detroit. Love it. You stay in any hotel in Detroit, and you'll get a bathrobe that reads Detroit on the back, like a Rocky robe. Yeah. They love their city. Go ahead.
Yeah, and downtown has come back. Look, I love New York where I live, but if a politician said New York is a mess, I'd say, yeah, it is. True. The subway's a mess. Quality of life issues. So Detroit has come back. It's great. I agree with you that there's a lot of pride. But I think a lot of people, both in the city and in the suburbs, are not necessarily going to react negatively to that because they could see room for improvement in the schools, in housing, in jobs, in transportation. It's not thriving in every possible way. And I think most voters, it's the kind of thing that gets discussed by elites, but I don't think most voters are going to be indignant that Donald Trump said something. Donald Trump says a lot of stuff. So I may be wrong. Maybe it'll cost him Detroit. Maybe it'll cost him Michigan.
Well, not people that are going to vote.
I just don't think it's negative necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, the people who are voting for Donald Trump aren't the kind of folks. I think Mark's right. I mean, the people who are voting for him or could be persuaded are like, I'm glad you're pointing out problems, right? So look, I don't think many of the people who probably are excited about what's happening in Detroit were going to vote for Trump in the first place.
I mean, I would say, I always say this to the audience, Dan, that if there's one thing Trump's good at, it's marketing. He's good at marketing and messaging. So I always feel like I'm on unsteady ground when I question his approach to these things, because I actually happen to believe that him raising the race issue with Kamala was clever. I think he actually was appealing to a certain segment of voters, including black men, who seemed to agree with him, at least in enough measure that it could make some difference for him. And of course, getting any sort of coverage from the media, even the shocked coverage, keeps him in the headlines. But what's your take on it?
Yeah, I mean, look, I agree with you. He is a brilliant marketer. I grew up, right outside the city in the 80s. He is the best at getting in the headlines and dominating a story. I'll disagree with everyone. And Megyn, maybe you were going that. I don't think that was helpful to him. I also think when he says, like, the only way that this city will be great again is if I'm elected. Like, so it was terrible. And then on January 20th, it's great. And then when I leave office after 4 years, it'll again be terrible. Like, I think when he does that, it doesn't help him. The one thing we know with undecideds is his personality and some of his conduct does rub them the wrong way. And I don't think this necessarily helps him.
Let me explain my point one more way, okay? And this goes, Megyn, to what you said about his raising her race. Donald Trump is the master of deciding what people are going to talk about. And if people are talking running up to the election about, are our cities as great as they can be? Or is there too much crime and our schools bad, et cetera? That's good for him. Now, I don't know that he thought it through that way, but he does have just kind of a sixth sense about this stuff. Now, he was president for 4 years and the cities didn't improve. So I think that's a very fair point for the Democrats to make. But if the goal is to have the last few days of the campaign be about immigration and be about the economy and to be about, people's concern about the cities, That's good terrain for Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm. They're eating the dogs. Like that. It's stuck in your head. They're eating
immigration.
the
We talked about
pets.
immigration
Right.
for a week.
That's right. And then some. Guys, thank you. It's a pleasure as always. Everybody should check out Two Way. It's excellent. Go to the Two Way YouTube channel and you can hear these three among many others because it works both ways. Pleasure. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Megyn.
Thank you.
Health has been a big topic around the country over the past few weeks. And one thing we don't talk about enough is how exercise plays a vital role in that. And it's not just cardio. We really need to look at strength training. More muscle helps boost metabolism and helps as we age. But let's face it, many are intimidated when it comes to lifting weights at a gym, not to mention the fact that we're all busy and we don't necessarily have the time. This is where Jacked Up Fitness comes in. They bring the gym to you and a full machine that fits in your house and does it all. It's an all-in-one home gym, and it allows you to do multiple strength training exercises, and best of all, it comes with access to their app, which includes multiple workouts, where you just push play and follow along. Jacked Up Fitness is an American company, and they are giving 900 machines this year to the Wounded Warrior Project, which is great. So if you're looking to take charge of your health and help vets on their road to recovery, order your home gym today and getjackedup.com, all right? At getjackedup.com and enter code MK for a 10% discount on your own home gym. This show encourages honest conversations, which is not always easy in today's media environment with big tech companies deciding who and what gets amplified and censored. But there is a new platform that prioritizes free speech and transparency without controlling the narrative, and it's called Ground News. Ground News is an app and a website that aggregates related articles from around the world, highlighting each source's political bias and corporate influence. Ground News reveals for every single story how media narratives are shaping the conversation and who's covering the topic. It makes it easier to navigate the news and may even be helpful to you for the next time your liberal friends send you a headline from their favorite biased news source. They're offering our viewers 40% off their Vantage plan, which gives you unlimited access to their website and app. Ground News is independent and supported by subscribers, not corporate interests. So check them out at groundnews.com/Megyn. That's ground, GROUND news.com/MEGYN. Groundnews.com/Megyn. Okay, before we go, I've got to get to a couple stories. Number one, Joe Scarborough apparently has a sit down with second gentleman, quote unquote, Doug Emhoff. And it's going to air on Monday. All we've seen so far is the tease. First, in this tease, it's only 2 minutes long. I'm going to show you two parts of it. First, he asks Emhoff about the debate and whether Trump should debate more on what. Just watch.
Why do you think Donald Trump won't debate her again?
Well, you saw the first debate, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why. Got his ass kicked. Mm-hmm. And so he's afraid that that's going to happen again.
He's spreading it about you, saying that tabloid stories about your personal life, saying it should be front and center. He's saying it about your wife and making incredibly crude and lewd suggestions about her past life. I'm just curious. I know I seem like a very zen, mindful person, but I think I'd be pissed off. And I'm just wondering, how do you all stay centered? How do you stay disciplined and not really go off and not really push back hard at these things?
We don't have time to be pissed off. We don't have time to focus on it. It's all a distraction. It's designed to try to get us off our game.
Does it get you off your game?
No. All we are doing, all we talk about is this election. We understand the stakes. We understand the responsibility.
What are
we
the
understand
stakes?
the account.
What are the stakes?
Our very country, our future. What kind of future are we going to have?
There's so much in there. That is an infuriating piece of tape. First, he sets himself up like, I got Kamala's back. Yeah, she kicked his ass. Yeah. Oh, you're so supportive of your wife. You're such a wife guy, as Jen Psaki said. And of course, that's exactly what Joe Scarborough wanted to hear. And then they go into, these tabloids, these evil tabloids who are reporting things about you. I mean, and I'm like, great. We might get something on the record from this candidate telling us whether he denies the report that he abused a former partner of his, that he openly smacked her in public so hard in 2012 that she was spun around and fled to get away from him, only to have him then force himself into her taxi cab. And she was scared enough she had to call a male friend back in New York to be on the phone with her in his presence because she did not know what he was capable of. The guy's got a hair trigger, reports the Daily Mail. So great. Let's get a denial. Let's get a comment. Let's do something and make some news. And instead, the landing Scarborough chooses is, I'd be pissed off. How do you stay centered and not go off when he doesn't give a shit? Joe Scarborough knows perfectly well this guy might be a woman abuser, and he doesn't care at all. Why is that? Why is that? Honestly, it's an honest question. Because he's a hack, sure, that could be it. Because he's got his own questionable past that he just rushes to the defense of any man accused. Is that what's happening there? I don't know what happened with him and the intern who died in his office. His story is, it was tragic. She was young. It has no reflection on him. It was a tragedy, and that's that. That's what the fact checkers say as well. But you tell me why Joe Scarborough, when given the first big opportunity, yes, there was the infuriating Tim Miller podcast that he did on the Bulwark, but who the hell expects anything out of Tim Miller? Joe Scarborough works for a major news organization. How dare you not ask him? You better have damn well asked him. When we air this interview, we see this on Monday, God, you better have effing asked him the question. And Mika Brzezinski, how about you? If he doesn't, will you call him out? Will you say American women are owed an answer about whether we're about to elevate an abuser of women into the Oval as the first gentleman? Are you going to go and smile gladly with this guy at the Easter egg hunt and pretend this isn't really a question about what he's like behind closed doors, potentially with our commander-in-chief? Because I'd really like to know. It's outrageous the way he asked that question. I'm just going by what MSNBC put out. I don't know what the full exchange is. I'm guessing that's it. I'm guessing if he were tougher on Doug Emhoff in the phrasing of that question, we would have seen it in the tease. It's not there. And he does not deserve the benefit of the doubt. What I've seen so far is disgusting. F you for not caring. And I have standing to raise this objection. I have questioned people on both sides, Republican and Democrat, about problematic histories with women and the abuse of women. I understand, and I have for a long time, that many on the Republican side don't even like these questions, and that their knee-jerk action is to defend guys against these. I'm not like that. And I have a history that proves it. What about you, Joe Scarborough? It's your side that says believe all women. You and Kamala Harris have said that. So let's do that. Let's believe the Doug Emhoff accuser. And when you sit down with him, you ask him about it. You know who did at one point understand that principle? Your wife. Because she got a bite at Joe Biden after Tara Reade came forward against him. Guess who interviewed her? Me. Guess who interviewed the Trump accusers? Me. And you have access to the actual man being accused. Ask him about the damn allegation. At least in the cases I was dealing with, it was in the distant past. Joe Biden and Tara Reade were decades ago. Fine, it doesn't make it any better, but I'm just saying, this was 2012. This was the relationship right before Kamala. And you don't ask him about whether he abuses women? Shame on you. Where are the women at MSNBC? Where's their outrage? Get in there. Stand up. Say something. They're melting down at CBS because they did a tough interview with Ta-Nehisi Coates, who wrote a book about how terrible Israel is. That led to an all-hands-on-deck meltdown with the top executives weighing in. Where are the women of MSNBC saying, these are serious allegations? 3 independent witnesses say that they support her. He, so far, has only given a bland denial through a campaign spokesperson. ask, if you really care about women and how much you purport to. Okay. It's infuriating. It's just such an example of the media bias and what Trump's up against. You don't think they'd ask if Melania Trump had some alleged history of abusing people, physically abusing people? You don't think they'd ask her? They'd want to make that a story? All right. And speaking of MSNBC and Mika Brzezinski. So she's out there this morning, and the latest desperation tactic is to try to paint Trump as a completely infirm 78-year-old man. He makes no sense. Look at him. Who could possibly know what he's talking about? He's a moron. He's basically Joe Biden. Now that Joe Biden's gone, age is a very serious issue to those on the left. They're very concerned about mental acuity and whether we are accurately reporting on warning signs. Please. So Morning Joe tees up this bit that Trump did while in Detroit yesterday and paints him as this downright daffy, incomprehensible man. Who could know what he's talking about? Here's first the bit of the soundbite of Trump that they played.
I saw engines about 3-4 years ago. These things were coming, cylinders, no wings, no nothing. And they're coming down very slowly, landing on a raft in the middle of the ocean someplace with a circle. Boom. Reminded me of the Biden circles that he used to have, right? He'd have 8 circles and he couldn't fill them up. But then I heard he beat us with the popular vote.
Wow. She was very confused, or so she would like us to believe. Here was part of her response.
Elon's rocket ships, cylinders, circles, beautiful circles. What the hell? But his weaves aren't brilliant. You know what he's doing? He's getting through the moment as an aging bullshit artist.
Yeah.
There's always a tinge of racism in everything he says.
Oh, he thought.
There's something wrong with people who can watch that and think the alternative, Kamala Harris, isn't more articulate, more prepared, more experienced, more able to, and when I say articulate, that means actually deliver a message to the American people on a certain policy. You know she can. If you can't believe it and this is your choice, you're lying to yourself and you're going to ruin this country. Right. It's going to be on you. It's going to be on you. Because there's no way you can watch that or any of his speeches and get anything out of it except for a hateful, racist, bigoted, tired, aging, branding, I wouldn't say genius, branding obsessed narcissist.
Okay. Tired, aging, confused. Who the hell knows what he's talking about? Well, anyone who's in news should know exactly what Trump was talking about. It actually was quite clear if you've been paying any attention to the news over the past 10 years since Trump entered the national scene. The circles he's talking about with Elon landing his rockets, that happened. It happened in 2016 when Trump was president. And it's happened since then, where Elon has landed his rockets through SpaceX in the Atlantic Ocean on these tiny little platforms. Here's video of it. As opposed to some rando place in the ocean, it goes down on a little target that Elon placed for it through SpaceX. And Trump was marveling at the precision of these rockets and how they hit the little circle, as opposed to just dropping anywhere in the Atlantic off of Cape Canaveral the way we used to do with our spaceships. That's what he was obviously referring to. And then he made a leap to other little circles that are politically relevant and how unpopular Joe Biden was and Trump's same old claims about how could this guy have possibly beat me. This right here we're showing is the New York Times and a photo by Aaron Schaff that was taken during the 2020 campaign of the circles that we saw everywhere. We could have pulled other photos just like this of all these Joe Biden campaign events. Look, these are reporters at a Joe Biden event. They were made to stand in these little circles at his campaign events ostensibly because of COVID, but Trump is positing it's because he couldn't get crowds there. And so they were, doing the socially distanced thing to try to make it look like they were COVID adherent, but really he was just unpopular. And then, of course, Trump parlayed it into, and then they wanted you to believe that he beat me. So it was actually perfectly comprehensible. You just wanted to mislead your viewers into thinking he had a senior moment. And he didn't. It was actually very easy to follow by anyone who's not a hack. Okay? Anyone who's not a hack like you. The whole thing is just, look, I realized this morning, Joe, but the whole clip is so indicative of what you get on that channel. Like the contempt for the people who will vote Trump. That you are voting for a racist misogynist, and you deserve what you get if you vote for Donald Trump. Well, that I agree with. And you deserve what you get if you vote for Kamala Harris. And you know what? Most of us are perfectly fine with that. Have a great weekend. We'll see you Monday. And if you have Monday off to celebrate Columbus Day, which is what it's still called and should remain, enjoy, have a parade, and don't pay any attention to the naysayers who want to have debates about its name. Take care, and we'll talk to you then.